Back in the day, before streaming, before CDs, we listened to music on albums. A vinyl disc spinning 33 and a third revolutions per minute brought us great music one side at a time. 20 or so minutes of music, 4 or 5 songs usually, that created a single listening experience. This format exposed us to other songs of the artist, not just the hits, and often flowed in an order that was created to build and maintain or mold a musical experience for the listener.
Sideshow brings musical experiences from the past to life today. Here, we discuss and review individual sides of record albums we have grown to appreciate and hope you will too. Welcome to The Sideshow. All right. Welcome, everyone, to The Sideshow. Mark is going to be taking the helm on this episode. Mark, why don't you tell everyone what we're going to talk about this episode?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Welcome, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about Cheap Trick's album Heaven Tonight, Side 2. This was an album from 1978 that I actually listened to a lot in 2 different periods of my life, which we'll talk about a little bit. But before we get into the album itself, a little bit of background on Cheap Trick. Cheap Trick, Midwest band from Rockford, Illinois, and that kicked up in the early 70s. I think they were technically formed in 1973 when Rick Nielsen, their guitar player, Tom Peterson, their bass player, and Bunny Carlos, their drummer, connected in Rockford. The band actually moved out for some time in the early 70s to Philadelphia, and they kind of had some name changes to the band. They actually had a tour in Europe, and then ultimately came and moved back to Rockford again. And it was at this time, so they'd had a different lead singer at this time, and they came back to Rockford. They changed their name to Cheap Trick, and they brought on Robin Zander as their lead vocalist. And this is what this was Cheap Trick then with their lineup. And it wasn't until 1977 they released their self-titled debut. This was kind of the I guess what would be, look at all of albums, what would be their kind of weakest. All right, hang on a second. I just froze there for a second, so I'm gonna back up and because I think there was a period of time there that just got missed. I'm concerned about the thing. I'll edit that. I'll edit that out.
Go back to right before you start talking about the first album.
Yeah. So they're back in Rockford. The band has now gotten together. They actually played really bowling alleys and warehouses and high school gymnasiums, really just kicking around the Midwest. And it wasn't until 1977 that they were actually able to get a record deal and release their first self-titled debut album, Cheap Trick. And this, looking back at their albums, was kind of a rawer type of music, a little darker type of music compared to what they would move into a more poppy type arrangement music. But the bottom line, although there was some I wouldn't call it critical acclaim, but critical favor of this album, it really fell flat as far as sales went. So then later in 1977, they released their second album, In Color. This was, again, more of a lighter, poppier type orchestration. And they had a single that they released, which would later become a bigger song from them, but their song, I Want You to Want Me, was released off this album. But it fell very flat in sales as well. So they're still floating around without any real success in the United States. But as it turned out, the band was incredibly popular in Japan. And it's difficult to understand why. The Japanese audience just really seemed to enjoy their music. And in 1978, they went on a tour in Japan, which has been described by a lot of accounts as almost a Beatlemania type experience with the fans there. And they did a few concerts there at the Budokan Theater, and the music from these concerts was brought together into an album, Cheap Trick at Budokan, that was only supposed to be released in Japan initially. And while they were doing this this tour, the album that they were working on and ultimately released was the album that we're going to talk about today, Heaven Tonight, which was released in May of 1978. Now, when you take a look, what ultimately happened was the popularity of Cheap Trick, at Budokan, was it just kind of boiled over for the record company, and they ultimately released it in the United States in February of 1979. And it was a huge hit. It's a triple platinum album. Some of the songs that had been released previously that had kind of failed and flopped on previous albums, such as I Want You to Want Me, were big hits coming off of the live album. And the reason I really like to take a look at the album Heaven Tonight, which was the studio album that they were working on was released right around this time, is because it kind of gives a picture of where Cheap Trick was at musically, the type of music they were trying to make in the studio when they did this tour in Japan and produced this incredibly popular and incredibly successful live album. So although Cheap Trick at Budokan is what really introduced the public to their music, and the success of that live album is what made Cheap Trick really famous, this album, Heaven Tonight, is just a window into the type of music that they were trying to make at this time. So I find it a fairly significant album if you're going to look at Cheap Trick. Well, now, that said, real quickly, I just want to point out, Mike, that said, that doesn't necessarily make Cheap Trick an overly substantial band, or this album an overly substantial album. But so anyway, Mike.
Well, I'm not going to push back on you on that comment, but that doesn't mean it's a bad album or that they were a bad band. Yeah. Because the first time I ever heard Cheap Trick was the live version of I Want You to Want Me from the at Budokan album on the radio. And it's a hard song not to like. And just the response from the Japanese audience, singing along and stuff like that. It had kind of an infectious, pop friendly sound, but it was guitar music. I mean, Cheap Trick was guitar music, and they managed to sort of combine various elements of pop rock, hard rock, and kind of punk rock, or sort of new wave type stuff into a ball of wax that sounded like it would sound like Cheap Trick. It had a distinctive sound to it, and when you look at the band, in 1978, I mean, that was still kind of the living in growing up in Appleton, Wisconsin, this like the punk rock new wave thing was still not, still just sort of trickling its way into the kind of the public consciousness, at least the high school mainstream music listening. And you look at the band Cheap Trick as they're pictured on both the album cover for I think all of their album covers up to that point. You've got Robin Zander and Tom Peterson. They look like conventional rock stars. But then you turn onto the back cover where they'd show Rick Nielsen, the lead guitarist, and Bunny Carlos, the drummer. I mean, Bunny Carlos looked like sort of a minor character in a bad European spy movie.
Yes, yes,
He was just looked kind of odd, and Rick Nielsen looked like back in high school, we knew guys kind of like him, sort of likable goofballs
yes, yeah,
in the days before, they diagnosed kids with ADHD
yeah,
and medicated them. And so they were a unique collection of guys, and and their music, at least the music on the live album, I think music on Heaven Tonight. I
yeah.
don't possess the only Cheap Trick that I possess at this point is a double CD, which is kind of like the complete concert from the Budokan recordings.
Yeah.
Which includes everything that was released on the album back in 1978, and then some additional stuff from the same tapes that were recorded. But there's just it's party music. Is
Yep.
really what it is. It's music to listen to on the radio. I mean, then we'll get to a song, that
Yes.
talks about
Yep.
that. And this. I think it's a good album to select for the band because it really kind of, it is their moment. It was their moment around that time when when the Heaven Tonight and at Budokan were released.
Absolutely, and that we really, when you're talking about Cheap Trick, we've already mentioned it a lot, but the At Budokan album, that was Cheap Trick. It was, they kind of fell into it by accident. They didn't necessarily intend it to be released. In fact, it wasn't even intended to be released in the United States at all. Not that dissimilar from Deep Purple Made in Japan.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's
Exactly.
you can't even imagine like what would have happened if that never would have been released in the United States. Cheap Trick would not have been Cheap Trick if they hadn't released at Budokan in the United States. It was such a disruption. They actually had another album, Dream Police, their next album after Heaven Tonight, in the can, and they postponed the release of that because of the success of At Budokan. And the album Heaven Tonight, there was on the released album, the song Surrender was from side 1 of Heaven Tonight. We're going to talk about side 2. And that was a part of the At Budokan album. But if you're listening to those entire recordings, and as you said, they subsequently released CDs that had the full concerts on them, there was 3 other songs from this album, all from the first side, that were included on those full recordings. So they were touring with this music when At Budokan came out. So again, another reason why it really was big. And we kind of have an expression that bands at certain points are holding the pliers as far as really capturing the audiences of the times. And Cheap Trick certainly was holding the pliers when At Budokan came out. Now, they didn't hold them for long. Dream Police had some success, kind of riding off of this. It was popular, but after like 1980, when in 1980, they had moved from playing bowling alleys. They were now headlining arenas. They were big. They were on top. And they very quickly moved off of that. They had an album, All Shook Up, in 1980. And again, they were given the tools by the record industry. In 1980, All Shook Up was actually produced by George Martin. George Martin from the Beatles production produced this album. And it had a little bit of success, but we were already on the way down. And after that, they went through some struggles. They went through some lineup changes. They went through some struggles with legal issues with the record companies. They had some pop back up again with some a hit here and there, but never came anywhere close to the momentum that they had during this time period that we're going to talk about.
Well, there was, that's certainly an apt comparison to the Deep Purple album. And at the time that album came out in the early 70s, that was when like Led Zeppelin had really kind of broken out. The Who had already established itself as a live band. And so, those kind of hard rock bands were focusing on live performance. Mm-hmm. And it was a different sort of thing later in the 70s, I mean, around the time when we were in high school, very first started to go to concerts. And, back in the day where, the really big bands, you'd have to go down to Milwaukee or Alpine Valley or something like that. But a lot of, you use the term arenas, arena rock. And, you could go up to the Brown County Arena, which in Green Bay, which just wasn't that much of a drive from Appleton, and buy a concert ticket for, $8.
Yeah.
And go see a nationally known act, sometimes with a nationally known opening act.
Yeah.
And it was just good timey, back, when, festival seating where, nobody got all that uptight about it and you didn't have the crush to get in.
Yeah.
And people were, they were too busy drinking beer out in the parking lot to even know when it was time to go in. And Cheap Trick's music fit, I think, very neatly into that kind of milieu.
Yes.
Guitar-oriented music, good timing. I mean, not that every song was there was some more serious themes in some of their
Sure.
songs, but for the most part, it was good timey guitar, stomp your feet music.
Yes.
And so that they for that time they resonated well with a big chunk of the music listening audience in the United States and other places apparently as well.
Absolutely, and they kind of mastered a concept that was working through the 70s, as far as this entertaining music to listen to, and the album, and this is the album here. As we talked about, this very common theme for them, with Robin Zander and Peterson on the front, and the back, as we talked about. I mean, Bunny Carlos, the drummer, and the goofball, that cap he continued to wear. I mean, Bunny Carlos looks like if they made a movie from The Simpsons. I mean, he would be a character in it without anything. Just a one point about this record. These guys are clearly in a public restroom. It's not immediately clear where the very young looking Robin Zander and Tom Peterson were at, but this picture is actually one single picture. If you could open the album cover up, you can see right here, it's the shoulder of Bunny Carlos on the back. It's a single area. They're all in the bathroom. Their neat thing about record albums was, actual vinyl albums, the ability to do interesting things like this with the cover, and you could just picture some stoned high schooler figuring that out as he moved the album back and forth.
Far out.
Just one of those. That's right. Well, far out. It's one
far
picture.
Out.
Anyway, yes, very common. This is for their earlier albums what they did with all of them. But as we said, when this came out, one of the reviews was, look, this is a really well done album, but it's kind of dated. This whole notion of we've got some good guitar, some entertaining guitar, we've got some themes to the music that we have, and there's a formula of cranking out songs. And the critic really said this is well done, but it's starting to get a little dated. Now I'll point out that this kind of, I feel, as we moved into the 80s and MTV and hair bands, this completely fell apart, where the notion of let's just come up with a song about partying, and then we're just gonna sing about how we want to party, and you hear some of that in this album, but it's a little more sophisticated. It's moved to, a little bit more of a story as opposed to just a song that goes on and on and on saying, hey, let's just bang your head, bang your head, bang your head, which is what we started to hear as we move forward to. So I'd almost look at this as kind of an end of an era where there was easy formulas to create guitar rock that audiences really enjoyed. And this was certainly one of them.
I would agree with you that there was from the late 70s into the 80s, there was a change, and it wasn't immediate. And I mean, when you think of or when I think of 80s music, I think of this sort of shimmery, synthesized, a lot more synthesizer providing texture to the music. And here there's not a lot of keyboard in Cheap Trick. It's the
No.
guitar sound, and now like you mentioned, the hair metal bands that came up in the '80s. That was it was just kind of a different sort of thing. And so I mean they sort of struck at the right time on the one hand, but it was kind of the end of that time, or as you said, the end of the era. So I agree that they were sort of part of the last hurrahs from the 1970s kind of arena rock that by 5 years later just wasn't in vogue anymore.
Yep, exactly. Kind of the MTV era changed a lot in music. So we're definitely talking about before that. So we're looking at this album. Side two is what we're going to look at today. Side one had a lot of the material that they actually did play in their tours. So this was you had to listen to this side to listen to this music, and putting it all together. I spent a lot of time listening to this song in the early 1980s. I was in the service station at White Sands Missile Range, New Mexico, and this was just a song, an album people were listening to. And then again, when I first got out of the service, and I was back going to school in Madison. Actually, this is probably before you moved there, Mike. I just, for whatever reason, spent a lot of time listening to this album. So I think about it from time to time, and from time to time now we'll put it on. 5 sides on the album, on the vinyl album. There's 5 songs on the album. If you see the CD or if you go to Spotify, they took the last song and they break it into 2. There's not new material, but for whatever reason they credit it as 2 songs. We'll get to that when we get to the last song. But the first song is a pretty basic rock tune called "Takin' Me Back." Starts out with some guitar kind of pounding at you, and what it's about taking me back. This person is being taken back into a time when his heart was broken by a girl, and it's not a whole lot of sophistication in the lyrics. In fact, the verses and chorus tend to repeat themselves, and it first starting with "You're taking me back." I'm envisioning someone runs in to a woman, or maybe a woman is trying to make amends with a guy, whatever. Fast forward a couple years or whatever, and this is all taking them back to a long time ago. And so there's a lot. The words "taking me back" happen a lot in these lyrics. They're used quite a bit, and the actual verses themselves really tell the story of what was happening back then. So we start out with this really we're introed with the chorus about "You're taking me back to a long, long time ago." And the verse itself is, you let me down, you didn't think of me. I won't forget what you did to me. So clearly looking back at this time, and we move into this chorus again about "You're taking me back, I remember it well, you're taking me back a long, long time ago." And back into the verse again, back to this time when you thought you could make a fool of me. So clearly someone's got some bad feelings about what happened this time ago. And there's a bridge that's in the middle that that slows down, kind of drags down a little bit, about this, again, thinking back to this broken heart, and then it bops back into being taken back again. But, not a whole lot of message aside from the fact that, this guy's just communicating to this girl that, look, I see you, I get taken back, and I'm not real happy with what I'm taken back to.
And I mean, there's not much more to say about what the song is about than what you've already said. But one of the things that I think is a good aspect of this song is the singer he's not feeling sorry for himself. I mean, he's maybe getting a little, melancholy feelings about, what might have been or whatever. But he's not. It's not a downcast, sad song. It's got some. It's kind of a rocking song. to some
Yes.
extent. And also, it's not a vengeful song. I mean, he's
Yeah.
calling a spade, but not not looking to. It's not a vengeful song either. So it's sort of, yeah, this shit like this happens, and
Yep.
you're gonna have things that don't go your way, and there's times where you're going to be forced for whatever reason to have to think about it because you run into somebody or whatever it may be. But hey, your toes are still tapping, so let's rock. And
It is a toe tapping song too, right? I mean, it's got a basic steady beat, but it keeps that going. So certainly not a sad song, certainly not a weepy song. It's a foot tapping, guitar song that moves you into the album.
yeah. So kind of consistent with the sort of radio friendly music, radio friendly rock music that we've talked about on some other sides that we've discussed, and I think there's a good example of that. Radio friendly rock music.
Yeah, and good transition to the second song of the side, it's called On the Radio. And it really, it's hard, especially for young people nowadays, to understand how important radio was to people that wanted to listen to music. I used to talk in my job. I talked before I retired. I was in a technology industry that talked a lot about customer demands and expectations. And I used to point out when I was young, compared to kids nowadays, when I was young, if there was a song that I wanted to hear, I could either go out and buy the album, which was not really practical, especially, with all the different types of music that I wanted, or I could turn on the radio and I could wait for that song to play. And there was times during the day, maybe at the end of the day, radio stations would play the top 10. And, we would actually sit around as a group and listen to the radio. That was our activity, kind of maybe going back and forth. What's the number one song going to be? You could kind of count on the popular songs of the day being played there. But that's how you listen to music. That's how you heard new music. The idea of being able to think of a song and just play it, as is available nowadays in streaming, was non-existent. And your pathway to music was the radio. And listening to songs on the radio, spending the day, sometimes having it on in the background, but sometimes that being your activity, listening to the radio was kind of a big deal. And that's what this song is all about. It's on the radio. I love the music on the radio. It's what they're playing. When the radio's on, you and me get crazy. I mean, it is just, it revolves around the radio. The listener or the singer is pleading with the DJ to play their favorite song. This is what we were talking about before. You literally had to wish that the DJ would play your songs. And this obviously translated. Some radio stations would have call-ins and request lines where you could do it, but those were hard to get through. And the bottom line is you just kind of sat and prayed that the DJ would play the songs you liked.
Well, and all through, from starting in elementary school through high school, I mean, we're always listening to the radio. You kind of, when, you first, you get like a handheld transistor radio, with a 9-volt battery, and listening to WNAM, AM,
Yep.
top 40. Well, then, like maybe in junior high, you start to get a little more sophisticated in your tastes, and maybe you get a radio with a couple of D batteries where there's actually an antenna and maybe a squelch on it, and you're listening to WIXX on
yes.
FM, which was still top 40, but a little smoother, a little
FM sound.
More FM sound. And then when we were in high school, well, we were listening to WAPL, 105.7, the AOR, album-oriented rock station. And so even though in junior high and high school we were acquiring albums and playing them at home and when we were out and about people's houses and whatnot, but we were continuing to listen to the radio because not only were we able to hear the stuff that we were kind of liking that we just hadn't bought the album of, but we were also getting exposed to new music. I mean, because WAPL played what became known as classic rock, but also was playing current album rock. And so the radio, and there were parties that we were out at where there were a lot of people, reveling in whatever was going on, where they just turned on WAPL. The albums weren't played. There were a lot of times albums were played, but a lot of times it was just turn on WAPL, and just that kind of going out on Friday night, drop the coin right into the slot, sort of thing. After you get out of school, it's Friday night, and let's turn on the radio. They sing it in this song. It really does a nice job of capturing just that thing.
Yeah, and I mean that's a very good point. It was the notion of putting money into a jukebox was not really the thing anymore because you had options on the radio that people listened to and people enjoyed. And so this song it's very upbeat. I mean, this is listening to the radio makes you happy. Right, it's a great thing. We're looking forward to it. We're exciting. The song moves along. There's more keyboards in this song than say you hear in some of the other songs that are out there because it's trying to create a festive type of environment. The song moves along very quickly, and towards the end, the song actually kind of outros with this. They've got a DJ talking, one of these fast talking, early in the morning DJs quickly giving you the weather and it's me, Captain Gonzo, right, ready to roll hot wax for you, and just really jabbering really fast, kind of in tune with the music, and it's a really good kind of outro. Gives you that feeling of the of the radio and waiting for these people to to get done talking and play some music. So I think it's a good song. It kind of picks up the pace a little bit from Taking It Back was a little more straightforward and heavy, and this song kind of picks up the pace, gets you tapping your feet, and it's certainly a notion that everybody identified with in the late 70s.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and just a kind of song at any time. If anyone's into rock and rock music, you're driving home from work on a Friday night and a song like this comes on, you're gonna be tapping your foot, and it's that kind of mood song. Good. It's a great song, I think.
And so that second song, we move to the third song, and we slow down and drag down with this song. It's a song called Heaven Tonight. Couple different ways you can, at least I think it's clearly a song about drug use and potentially drug overdose, because a lot of notion of it's a slow, again, kind of dragging sound. It starts out down the line. It's not, nobody's tapping their foot to this song, but you move fairly quickly into this chorus of, it's a slow, clearly the drug talking to this person, just asking them, would they like to go to heaven tonight? And that question, you can obviously see both sides of that question. Heaven can be this euphoric place that the drug takes you to. Heaven can also be, heaven, where death, that the drug takes you to. And the song its wording talks a little bit about how, you can go too far, how you couldn't get much higher if you tried, and then you get to a point where you can never come down. And that's kind of the dragging part of the end, that's where it's just repetitive about, you can never come down, you can never come down. Again, a slow, kind of a dark look to this that doesn't paint a real exciting kind of flowery view of getting high, and I certainly points out the line that you can cross, and a lot of people obviously have crossed.
I think there's no escaping the drug imagery in the song, and that ultimately, that's what it's about, and the way you describe the different potential meanings or inferences
Yes.
to heaven. But the kind you can go too far there, and this is something that was a thing back then. Possibly I would say probably more so than it is today. But where there were people that were killed in car accidents when we were in high school. There was a neighbor of ours was in a car accident. He wasn't seriously injured, but a person was killed, and
Yeah.
another and because they were out partying late and just kind of took it a little too far. There was that motorcycle accident down on Water Street by the river, where someone in our class in high school was injured, not seriously, but the driver of the motorcycle was killed.
Yeah.
Just for they're out partying and pushing it a little too far, and so there's some there's some things beyond drug use, or specifically heroin, that the song implicates, but just kind of it's a downer. I mean, it's not a pleasant song, not necessarily so unpleasant that you take, if someone put the album on it at a party or whatever, you'd take it off, but the message is take care.
Yeah.
And because there can be consequences to reaching. Mama always told me not to look into the eyes of the sun.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
And it kind of ends with, clearly someone that has been in this situation before, where it's like, even if when you push it a little far, even if it doesn't come to become a negative thing, like where someone gets hurt or somebody dies or that type of thing, pushing these things too far just becomes unpleasant. The last words in the song are down inside, you're getting nervous. You've never been this high before. And then it kind of goes into this, almost like a screaming type thing, which is like, bottom line is, you get too fucked up. It's just not fun anymore. You can feel the paranoia of being too high, right? Like, why did I get so high? And the paranoia that brings on. So it's also kind of ending with a message of, even if someone ends up not getting hurt, in other words, no harm, no foul. Well, not really, because you push it too far and it's not even fun anymore, which I also think is a pretty important message to anybody that's deciding they want to go too far. So I'd agree. The song is not the song brings you down. It's not a bummer. I mean, they do a good job of moving the song, and the way that they transition between the kind of the messaging and the slower times. They do a good job with that. And it's just a good switch up from these first two songs that were much faster moving, kind of pick me up type stuff. Just settles everybody back a little bit.
Well, and I guess I don't disagree with anything you said, and kind of that message, just take care, I guess is how I choose to sum up the message. Look, go out and have a good time. You want to have some drinks. You want to carry on, okay, or whatever. You want to get high, whatever. There's this. Young people are going to do these kind of things, and some older people. But take care, and don't let going too far, because it could be anything. Don't go out and see how thick the ice is on the Fox River. Just all sorts of little things that it can give us. Just take care. No, you don't have to go out and get a pack of cigarettes in your car. Just take care.
So, and which obviously very good message in any situation,
Yeah, yeah.
especially in these. So we move past that, and then we speed into a much, again, more type guitar oriented, just a heavier beat type song called "Stiff Competition." Now it's hard to listen to this song or think about the lyrics without the notion. I mean, just get stiff is probably referring to a stiffy or
I,
the
I,
you know
I don't think that that's reasonably subject to debate
yes
in this
yes.
song.
So there is they talk about stiff competition, and I think that let's say the competition getting towards the end of the evening, and there's 10 guys and only 2 girls in a bar. That I think is a good example of some stiff competition. And the song then, it has some fun with that, and and eventually gets down to a guy and a girl having fun together. They enjoy having fun together. When love at first sight. Some humor with it too. The notion of it took me minutes. You're still waiting. So kind of implies somebody, a man and a woman are together, and maybe the man got done fairly quickly, and the woman is still waiting for your turn. Is how they describe it, and the man promising that it won't be long until that happens. So quite a bit of sexual ideation and imagery here. At the same token, it is just the song moves very quickly. It's got a quick. It's upbeat in the way that it moves through, and there's a bridge that they move through twice in the song that kind of changes things up, slows it down a little bit, and it's more of, again, let's get away from this stiff competition. And they talk in there about I screw you, you screw me, they screw us, here we go again. But it slows down at 2 different points, kind of bridges into when the man and woman are together and looking in each other's eyes. They, the fun that they have together. And then it's back to the kind of, I guess we're back at the bar again, and it's stiff competition, back to it again.
Well, the imagery is relatively ham-fisted,
Yeah.
lyrically, but we're kind of going back to in high school, going out on Friday night listening to the radio. Well, what else were you thinking about? If you didn't have a steady girlfriend, which applied to a lot of guys in high school, you were looking to you go out to any kind of social gathering where boys and girls or young men and young women were hanging out together and rock and roll music was playing, and I can't speak for the girls, but the guys were looking to find a girl who was willing to settle for him.
Yeah,
that's what they were doing. That's what they were doing.
Yes.
I shouldn't. I don't know. I'm saying they. That's what we were doing.
Yes. And I mean that. Well, I mean that's 95% of the time. The other 5% was, can I get another beer? Right. You've got to. Is there a way that I can get some beer or maybe get some weed or something like that? But yes, the other 95% was completely consumed with that target in mind. So again, kind of as this is again a great example of the arrangement of a side. Having these 2 heavier songs, we drop back into Heaven Tonight, where it really slowed down, kind of dragged down a little bit. Now we're up talking about basically talking about going to the bars and trying to get laid, right? Just and a more of a driving upbeat again. It picks you back up, toe tapping song, and then we move to what is the final song on the album, which is How Are You, which I feel is one of the happiest songs ever, right? It is this song I listened to and identified as a happy song. I think that and it's so close together. In fact, I feel that one might have actually been a ripoff of the other. But anybody that's ever listened to and enjoyed the song Mr. Blue Sky by ELO, this is basically the same song. It is, and I mean, Mr. Blue Sky came out in October of 1977 while they were working on this album. And I have no doubt because, just the similarities between just a very quick, upbeat, happy kind of tempo that's going on in the background. And then the words are just, with a couple exceptions in the song, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's just, hello, how are you? How'd you sleep last night? Did you dream of me? I mean, this person gets up, they're happy. Hello, good morning. Shouldn't sleep all day. Such a beautiful day. I mean, it is just a happy, upbeat song. I've never in my life had this song on and didn't feel happier as I was listening to it than when I did when it came on. It's just it's that type of song.
Well, I mean, it's an apt comparison with Mr. Blue Sky. I mean, because we back around the time that we were listening to Cheap Trick, we were that, was it Turn to Stone or what was Out of the Blue? Out of the Blue was the ELO, Electric Light Orchestra album that had that on. I think that Mr. Blue Sky was a little more melancholy, a little more wistful. Mm-hmm. Whereas this is just like, hey, wake up and smell the coffee. You want to stay in bed. I've been working all night. I've been working all day. Hey, come on. Yeah. I mean, it's fuck it. Let's party. Let's do something. Yeah. Let's, they're ending the album, not unlike like the Friday night, that Friday night feel. Hey, I mean, it's a let's get up and, and have at it. So I agree with you that there's just too many little similarities to ignore as far as the comparison with Mr. Blue Sky. But this is a much more upbeat, and as you say, just a happy song. The driving home from work on Friday night with it on the radio, or going home from school, getting ready before you're going to go meet your friends. It's a upbeat, and it's a rocker. And not rocker is not necessarily the word I'm looking for, but it is an upbeat, uplifting, positive, glasses half full type of song.
When I was I said this was an album that was frequently on when I was stationed in New Mexico, and I was a military policeman. We worked these shifts. We'd work for 10 days, and then we'd get 4 days off in a row. So we'd complete a shift on a Wednesday night, and we'd have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off. So Wednesday night, when you got off a shift, tended to be a long night. And one of these places, there was a lady, her name was Lana, who had a house. Her husband was stationed in Germany, and we knew him and whatever, but she still retained this house. So we didn't have to be in the barracks. We'd go to this house that was on base, and she's like, "Yeah, you can come up here." She was a civilian, and she actually worked on the base, and so she had to go to work on Thursday. But she said, "Come on and you could party here in the house," and she'd tend to stay up till 2 a.m. or whatever, and then she'd go to bed because she was going to have to get up and work the next day. We'd sometimes be up all night, that kind of situation. And I can remember one morning she had gotten up because she had to get ready to go to work, and this song was playing, and she was moving back and forth between the bedroom and the bathroom. We could see down the hallway from where she was, and she'd be dancing, like kind of getting herself ready to go to work in the morning, and this song was playing, and I can still picture that. I mean, it was like a cup of coffee in the morning, just listening to music, kind of getting ready from work. And that's the kind of song this was. It's got a way of lifting you up. Just a great way to finish out this album, this side, excuse me, that has had kind of a variety of different types of music that are there. And ultimately the last song on this album.
Back in the days when you were young enough to stay up until 2 a.m. and still get up and be able to make it to work.
Oh yes, this is time gone by. Without a doubt.
but sort of I think consistent with this song, kind of closing out the side and closing out the album, really, is it's the sort of song that a band would play as like the last song of their set or the encore. It's like, okay, here's your last chance to boogie, or however you want to describe it. Your last chance to jump up and down, and I can picture that, what you describe. If there was a, like, from a scene from a movie where someone was the working girl or working person has to get up in the morning, they've had a few drinks the night before, and just to part of their injecting a little life into their morning along with the coffee was this. That I can picture it. I can picture
so
it.
it just a happy song, and the song ends, and there's a little break, and it comes back again on the record album. This was still credited as the same song, and it really changes up. You hear this, what appears to be like a concert. You're live in concert, and you have this person, and all they say, a couple times they say, "Oh, konnichiwa," which hello in Japanese, and you can take it that this came from this Japanese tour that they had, that just goes on for about 30 or 40 seconds, and it fades out, and then that's the end of the album. It's not credited on the album as a separate song. If you get the CD though, or if you go to like Spotify where you'll see this, it's actually credited as a separate song. It's called "Oh Claire," like this girl's name Claire, and oh Claire, which is actually a play on the town of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. They just kind of a humorous kind of play on that town, which is not that far north from Rockford, where these guys were from.
College town where they probably played when they were in their early stages. And I have spent a night with a friend while attending UW Eau Claire. And I didn't know what to be honest. It's been a long time since I listened to this album, and when I listened to it in preparation for our episode today, I didn't know what to make of that. But what you say about it was sort of a little souvenir from their apparently very successful Japanese tour that they sort of put on the album as for something to do with that. That makes sense to me.
Sure, and I mean they clearly that success, or that kind of Beatlemania fandom that the Japanese had for Cheap Trick is clearly meaningful for them. I mean, that could have also literally been a thank you to them, because they were struggling up until to this point to get any type of traction with their sales, with their singles, and ultimately, interestingly enough, it was an album of their touring in Japan that catapulted them into this transition from playing bowling alleys to headlining arenas. And this was the album that was where they were at when that success hit. So I think it is, from that perspective, it's a significant album, and my favorite side of the album.
Yeah. Well, and as you kind of said towards the beginning, whether or not Cheap Trick is the most substantial band, or whether an album like this is going to be on in one of those 1,000 records to hear before you die kind of lists, it really was a great album in so far as it captured that moment, not only in sort of the evolution of rock music, but it was also fit very neatly into where we were at going to high school. When it came out. So it's a worthwhile album.
Absolutely.
And a worthwhile side.
Worthwhile and a really well put together side, which is what we talk about on the side show. Listening to from the beginning to end of a side, that experience. This was one that just works really well. Listening to all the songs in one sitting.
True. Good side, Mark.